Hello, everyone, and Dropkick for the Win is back. We're here talking about the NFL 2025 trade deadline. It is our recap and our thoughts on the trades that happened. We'll primarily stick with major trades.
Daddy. What's your fault? That's not a good word. It's a bad word.
And it is a bad word. Don't say that word.
Don't say that word.
Okay. And
it was a beamer of the gasoline in the snake.
Let's start things off with a relatively minor trade involving the Ravens, and then we'll move on to the bigger stuff. The Ravens sent out a conditional 5th rounder to the Tennessee Titans for edge Draymond Jones. He is hopefully going to be an answer for them because they've been having some issues with their pass rush. I believe he's on a contract, the end of the contract of his deal. He's more of their plan is to use him more on the inside linebacker for pass rushing than it is for an edge rusher, which I think is an interesting choice, seeing that is not what he is known for. But hey, who am I to question the mediocre Ravens defense and their continuation with head-scratching moves?
Yeah, I'm actually, by the way, if you thought that was a dirty word, we're going to say the word Jets a lot during this episode, so watch out here. And you seem to have your hands, you seem to have a little tie-up over there. So I'm going to kind of segue here a bunch of trades in a row because this trade actually... This trade actually goes hand in hand with another one, Kilroy. Sorry if I'm going out of order on you here.
No, it's fine.
To me, even more important about this trade at all is that the Ravens did anything to buy, right? Because they move on from Jair Alexander. The Eagles go out and basically try and buy the tertiary parts of their defense all at once here. And so if you're the Ravens, you look at your schedule, you have a pretty easy chunk of games coming up. You're in the middle of that bunch. You're making moves towards the playoffs. If you went into the deadline and did nothing but basically admit defeat on Jair Alexander, you're leaving the fans with a pretty bad taste at a time where they should finally start getting excited again. So is Jones to me necessarily a needle mover? No, not at all. But did you give up very little to get a name that most good NFL fans should be familiar with? And so you show, okay, getting rid of Jair Alexander was more addition by subtraction. We were actually being buyers during the deadline for a run towards the playoffs. As the Raven fan in the room, you can, tell me I'm nuts if you want, but I think this move is more about the message it sends than anything it's going to do for an already, pretty darn subpar defense.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it was the correct move, especially with moving on from Jair. I think they kind of had to at this point because he hasn't really played. He is supposedly healthy, just maybe like a little bit of a knee issues, but nothing like serious. And it seems odd that like he played week 1 and then took like 3 weeks off despite not having any major injury, just nursing his knee. And then like, it just seemed like an odd, like, it seemed like he wanted to be there because he signed, right? He was cut by Green Bay, and he signed with the Ravens. But it seems like either the Ravens, I don't know, maybe it was. I think a lot of it does have to do with this Ravens defense. I'm not sure Zach Orr is the correct coordinator moving forward. I know that they are going to continue to keep him at least for the remainder of the season, and I understand why, but at the same time, you had a shot early, right? You had an early enough bye week that you could have moved on, put Chuck Pagano in as your defensive coordinator. He's on your staff, right? And he's an experienced coach. So I don't understand why you wouldn't have just done that during your bye week, early enough bye week too. And but to continue this charade that the defense is that he's a good defensive coordinator is annoying as a Ravens fan because they had their issues last year, and then they had a relatively soft end of the year, and that made the defense look really good. And the same thing's happening again now, right? Like the schedule's starting to get soft again, and now he's looking competent again because the team, they're just playing against not as stiff of competition. But they had to do something. Moving on, Jair Alexander makes sense. I think that the Eagles I think what did the Ravens get? A 6th rounder. That's great for the Ravens because Alexander's already not playing game one Monday night for them. They're saying to get him acclimated.
I wouldn't worry too much about it on the Eagles side, but I mean, this was a dude who was getting healthy scratched for the Ravens. Even when he was healthy. Listen, I mean, we could sit here and claim to be experts all we want. We can sit here and debate until the cows come home what value was good and what value was bad.
We're just fans.
Even Aaron can tell you something is more than nothing, right? If Jair Alexander was giving you nothing and you got something for him, that's a win.
Oh, yeah.
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 Let's move and roll.
Let's move on to
Wait.
Would you like me to continue with the other Eagles moves? Nod yes. If you blink twice, yes.
Let's move on. I couldn't even hear what you said, so I wouldn't be able to nod or blink or whatever. Let's move on to the Jets and their. So I have my opinions. I think you have your opinions, and I know you have your opinions. I don't know if they're the same because we did not talk about this ahead of time. So I don't know your feelings on these trades. So the Jets traded Quinnen Williams, their star defensive tackle, to the Dallas Cowboys for a 2026 second rounder, 2027 first rounder, and defensive tackle Mazi Smith. And they also traded away where's this Sauce Gardner to the Colts for their 2026 and 2027 first rounder, along with wide receiver Adonai Mitchell. I think that's how it's pronounced. I could be saying his name wrong, and I'm sorry if I am. Take that off the screen. No, don't show. Don't keep that off.
I'm just showing
You can't show that.
A lot of Pokeballs. Heads up, Kilroy.
That one is definitely one you cannot show. It's Pokemon. We don't want to get it. Anyway. So it's here's they definitely got good return in terms of capital for the players that they sent out. A second rounder and a first for your a star defensive tackle is very good, and a capable defensive tackle to put in his place. The Sauce trade, again, 2 first rounders. You can't really complain. That's a lot to get. They are going to be presumably later first round picks, right? Because the Colts are going to be they're currently leading their division, and presumably will continue to be contending for at least the next 2 years that they for these draft picks, right? So my thing is this: Sauce is 24 years old, correct?
Yeah, I believe.
And he just signed a contract extension this offseason.
Correct.
Why move on from him? He's a two-time Pro Bowler, is he not? And an All-Pro as well?
Yeah.
So why move on from him? If he's not working in the system, you're not even sure you're keeping this coach. Or does this mean they are committed to keeping Glenn? Because that just is weird to me.
I think it does. If I may, so I don't know if you just heard that. Did you hear that sound? That was Will McDonald picking up his 17th sack of the day 3 minutes ago there. Listen, there's other talent on this team that they had not yet signed, who they're due to sign any day now, right? Will McDonald's going to get paid. Jermaine Johnson has to get paid. Breece Hall has to get paid. And then I don't want them to pay Elijah Vera Tucker, but they seem to be in love with this guy. His rookie contract's coming up soon. And then you have those secondary pieces, right? Braylon Allen looks like he's a superior, he's an elite backup running back. Mason Taylor looks like the real deal as a rookie tight end. You have to pay him in a couple years. You invested all this money. And listen, even when Darrelle Revis was, Darrelle Revis is Hall of Fame cornerback.
Right.
You literally could avoid using him, right? You could just throw away from him. There is a finite amount of damage that a cornerback can do. And so no matter how good you are, cornerback is one of the few positions on earth where there is an eventual diminishing returns. And so to make him one of the guys you paid, right? You paid him and Garrett Wilson. I don't care, to be quite frank. I wouldn't have made him one of the guys I paid in the first place. But more importantly, from a why trade him, to directly answer your question, we talked about it back in the summer, right? This team, Eric Watt's currently on the practice squad, but Watson Tufele gave him one of the best 4th and 5th defensive tackles in the league. Stiggers and Thomas, the 3rd-round rookie, gave them the best 4th and 5th cornerback in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like Simpson give them a lot of depth on the offensive line. Ruckert is a great TE3. Stone's a great TE2. They have almost comical depth. The last 20 guys on this team are about the best 33 through 53 anywhere in football. So here's the thing. If your team stinks and the back half of the roster looks correct, what are you going to do? You know what you have to do. You have to fix the front end of the roster, right? Forget the names involved, forget the players, the positions, the picks. Common sense prevails here. There's nothing. I mean, look who single-handedly won a game for them today, right? Guys you've never heard of. The RB4 and the wide receiver 5, who's already been cut this year at one point and re-signed to the practice squad, each had a big return on special teams, right? So you can't fault the last couple guys on this team. So if you're not going to fault them, you got to look at the top end of this thing and say they either weren't fitting with Aaron Glenn, like you said, they weren't buying into the culture, or they're not winners, which up until this point, there's no reason to believe anyone on this team is. And then just on top of that, not to be facetious, but why trade him? The answer at this point for the Jets is why not? I mean, you look at, this is their 2019 and their 2022 first rounders they just moved on from. If you'd like to take a guess what they did with their 2017, 2018, and 2021 first round picks in Jamal Adams, Zach Wilson, and Sam Darnold, flip those two guys if you want to be chronologically correct, they traded them too. And one of the Jamal Adams picks became Garrett Wilson, and one of the Darnold picks they then moved back up and became Breece Hall. So it's not like this is not a classic Jet move. So, I mean, it makes sense within the franchise. It makes sense within the logic of the team, and it makes sense within what they plan on doing moving forward if you do believe they're keeping Aaron Glenn, which I think they are, especially if, you said these are going to be late first rounders. I love Aaron Glenn. He's cold as ice, man. Look at who he gets in this trade, right? He goes and gets Mozzie Smith. You know where Mozzie Smith was drafted? 26th. He's basically saying, I'm not afraid of having to take late round first, picks. In fact, Let me prove to you right away I can make one a reclamation project. So he goes out and gets a guy who's exactly what they're going to trust Aaron Glenn to go out, draft, and mold. So to me, I love it because I love the value they got. But within the context of why, no brainer for the Jets on so many levels.
I don't know. I think giving up on a 24-year-old is ridiculous, no matter how you look at it, especially seeing he is a 2-time Pro Bowler and All-Pro. I think that But if age is your game, sorry to cut you off, but they brought back in a 23, a 24, and a 25-year-old here. I forget who, but in Mitchell Mozzie and Mechie, I mean, if you're just saying, oh, they're young, don't get rid of them, well, you brought in 3 25-year-olds to get rid of one. I mean, that's... I understand getting rid of Quentin Williams. That one, I totally understand that. There was talks of that even last year and in the offseason. I totally understand that one. I think the Sauce one, if you were on the my issue is this: he's young. You just gave him an extension. You still can get. You're still going to get value next year if he doesn't start getting acclimated to this system.
You weren't going to get more than 2 firsts for him. I mean, no.
You're not going to get
Godfather offer.
You still would most likely still gotten the 2 firsts.
If he had, I mean, he's PFF rank right now. He's worse than Brandon Stevens. You think if he continued to be worse than Brandon Stevens for 2 years, you'd get 2 first-round picks for this guy when you're also going to lose 1 year of eligibility, right? Each year he gets close to the end of his contract. I don't think, and plus these are picks coming from a team quarterbacked by Daniel Jones. He looked vulnerable again today against the Falcons. I mean,
you mean turnover machine, Danny Dimes?
Yeah, there's no guarantee if Jacksonville. I don't know if we're going to get to him in time here, but Jacksonville adds at the deadline, right? Tennessee is going to add another top 5 talent this year. If the Texans can figure out their O-line, listen, if the Texans draft well or figure out their O-line next year, the Colts are not even the favorite in their own division. And in a conference where the Bills and Patriots look like locks, the Chargers and Chiefs look like locks to go to the playoffs every year, or at least be a threat, there's a chance that Colt pick next year is somewhere around 17. I mean, there's no guarantee here, in terms of what this means for the Colts either. So I love this trade.
I cannot complain about the trade in the sense that the Jets definitely got the best value that they could. My issue is just the fact that it is hard to get a very good corner. And I do understand that this year he has not been doing well in this system. But he's not the only one. Like, this defense was a very good defense last year under Robert Saleh. And then you bring in Aaron Glenn and then your defense just falls apart. It's clearly not the talent of the players. It has to do with the scheme, right? At some point, you have to admit that, right? Not you. I mean, the team as a whole, right? Like, if your top end talent who is not performing to where it should be, and it was just performing at last year, maybe their morale is not high because of, again, maybe they don't like this coach, and maybe that is a problem with your locker room or whatever. But at the same time, what has the team done in a positive manner that would make you want to keep him? Because a couple of weeks ago you were ready to fire him.
But here's the thing, though. Brownlee has been an absolute steal from the Titans. He, not even making this up, he tried to fight a fan in the offseason, and they felt that he wasn't in a good enough culture to develop in Tennessee. So the Jets went out and stole him as a reclamation project, and he's looked good enough that they were able to move on from Michael Carter. A.Z. Thomas has looked good enough as a third-round pick that they were willing to insert him in the starting lineup, and he looked pretty good today. Malachi Moore has slowly come on. Part of what you have to consider is where they signed Sauce Gardner. It was literally my birthday this year. It was in July of 2025, at a time where you looked at this and said, okay, Aaron Glenn seems to want to take on these reclamation projects. They had signed Brandon Stevens when he stunk for your Ravens last year. They signed Andrew Sisko. They didn't use that first-round pick on a corner like so many people, including myself, wanted them to do. And so Sauce was almost more the safety net. At least we have Sauce, was the attitude on July 15th, 2025. Now, some have not worked out. Sisko has a barely above replacement level PFF ranking and now is done for the season. But Malachi Moore, for a day 3 rookie, has looked very serviceable. Brandon Stevens, like I said, is one of the highest PFF rankings since week 4. So the difference is that Aaron Glenn, who originally looked like he was just coming in and saying, trust me, I'm a defensive back whisperer, and it didn't look like that in the first 4 weeks. Now it's starting to look like that a little bit more. And so I'm not going to sit there and trash everything he's done, because the guys who, haven't stepped up and haven't done their job are the guys who have gotten paid. And in a long history of guys regressing on their second contract, is there a chance that Sauce Gardner is just content? He got paid. This is basically going to take him through the end of his career, or at least towards the very back end of his career. I'm not going to rule that out. I mean, remember, this is a guy, Sauce Gardner, and again, nothing against Sauce, but notice when he gets traded, he just sends the old "it's been real" tweet. Nothing sincere, nothing about missing his teammates, right? So he's already cold as ice about it. And remember, this is a kid who went to Cincinnati. He turned down offers from Iowa State. Iowa State, the 2 years when he was a junior and senior in high school, went 8-4, with whatever happened in the bowl game. Cincinnati went 4-8 when he was a junior and starting to look at schools. He turned down an offer from Kentucky. So he had bigger stages to go to. He had better teams to go to. He wanted to go to Cincinnati. He wanted to be big fish in small pond. There is something you could sit here and we could bring in a psychologist and break that down, but there's nothing that said that this kid always just is scrappy. He always just fights and does his best because that's what he does. If he did, he probably doesn't go to Cincinnati in the first place. So I'm not ready to rule out Glenn. I'm not ready to say everything the Jets have done is a disaster. I mean, they managed to find a 4th running back and a 5th receiver who literally won him a game today. So, again, it's you got to look at individual pieces and say, has the first tier, have the top names on the Jets been delivering this year? For the most part, no, which, by the way, is why Elijah Vera Tucker needs to go this offseason. But that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day.
Let me say this, and you may not like this. if you look, you said the past 4 weeks, correct?
Mhm.
I'm assuming you're including this week.
Since week 4. I didn't say 4 weeks. I said since week 4.
Okay. So, all right. So that's pretty. So, all right. So you have in there Dallas,
Okay.
Denver, which is their past. Bo Nix has not been particularly good. He's except when they're down, then he steps it up a notch.
Okay.
Carolina, who, let's be honest, their offense, their passing game, not the best. You have Cincinnati, where they did put up 1 billion yards on them.
Okay.
And you have Cleveland with Dylan Gabriel.
Okay.
So none of those are really like outside of, I guess, Joe Flacco.
Right, but correct me, was Sauce Gardner playing Kansas City those 5 weeks while Brandon Stevens was playing that? My argument isn't that Stevens is a true number one. My argument is Stevens has been better than Sauce. Young guys have been showing growth more than Sauce. They're all playing the same guys. They're all playing the same teams. But somehow everyone's starting to buy into Aaron Glenn other than Sauce.
Fair. What you fine if that's. I do understand what you're saying. I'm not disregarding what you're saying. I think they had to do the trade. At 2 first-round picks is too good to turn down. However, look, I will say this: there is a chance that Sauce is just Nnamdi Asomugha 2.0, and then this looks great for the Jets, right? And that the Colts, this looks like the Eagles' mistake when they went and signed Nnamdi in the offseason. Or this could be, I mean, really, I'll say this. Luckily for the Jets, corners don't seem to do well when they leave teams after they've been doing, when they start to go downhill or downhill. I think at 24 years old, it seems a little early to be saying he's going downhill, because typically this starts happening when they're around 27, because corners just don't have a big lifespan in the NFL. Unless they come in as like a nickel for the Ravens. But I will be excited to have Sauce on the Ravens in 5 years when he comes to be there. I will say the Jets had to do this trade. They really, really did have to do this trade. That's too good of an offer to ever turn down. I am just not sure if I would have done that if I was the Jets, in the sense that I don't know, were other teams looking at, was this just the only offer? Like I don't know. I don't disagree with you. I just don't. I feel like because they gave him the extension, it doesn't make sense to trade him right away. Is my problem.
I guess here's the counter argument to that, which is that is money that is going to go towards multiple people, including Will McDonald, who looked fantastic today, including Breece Hall, who was the offense today. It does give you some flexibility.
I think the fact that, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, that Breece Hall was that people were thinking that the Jets were going to trade him was crazy, because I everything I've heard about him he is like always been positive, and like he just was taking him a bit. Maybe it was not him. Maybe it was the coaching staff was trying to get used to it or trying to figure out what they wanted to do with him. But he is the talent. He is a talent, right? Like that's always been like why my the words are not coming to my. So I'm glad that they didn't trade him, to be honest. I liked their desire to keep him. And hopefully they will give him an extension this offseason and commit to him long term.
Yeah, I will tell you real quick, and based on how loose that mic is starting to move, possibly be ready to mute yourself over there, depending on if that thing gets thrown or not. But real quick, so just to kind of, and again, if you're out there listening, thanks for putting up with this Jets talk tonight. And if you know more than I do, feel free to comment. But here's what I definitely can tell you. The Colts called every team and said, what's the situation on your corners? The Jets basically came out like a diner menu. They said, everyone's available. Here's the price on everybody. Match our price or don't. we're not bending off of that. So in that sense, it made for a really good partnership between the Colts and the Jets, because the Colts basically, Jim Irsay's daughter basically went out and said, let's get the best guy no matter the cost. And the Jets said, here's our outrageous cost. We're not bending from it. So it actually was they were good partners to begin with. For Breece Hall, listen, in a vacuum, I'm with you. I wouldn't have moved him, but the idea for the Jets was collect picks as much as you can, and I'll talk about that in just one moment. But everyone had a price tag on them. Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis would still give you a very, very good, running tandem, even if you moved on from Breece. And just so you know how close it was, Breece Hall's bounty was a 3rd-round pick. They said anyone offers us a 3rd, you get Breece Hall. Kansas City offered a 4th and would not bend off of it. So they were 1 round away, which is shocking to me that Kansas City didn't at least, and maybe they did, I don't know, like I said, but if I'm Kansas City, listen, a 4th that becomes a conditional 3rd if we make the Super Bowl. Hey, how about a 4th and a swap of a 6th and 7th and the swap of a 4th and a 5th in 2028? The fact that they didn't, since we apparently will take anyone under the age of 25, how about, our 4th and whoever we drafted in the 5th, 6th, and 7th round in 2024. There were a lot of ways Kansas City could have probably bridged that gap, but the Jets were very steadfast in here's our price, match it or don't. But Breece Hall did literally 32 picks away from getting traded. And real quick, why they did that, speaking of Breece Hall, and again, there are a lot of anecdotes in support and against the Jets doing this, but I think it's worth noting that Sam Darnold trade they made to Carolina gave them in 2022 picks 35 and 38. 35 was their own, 38 was the Sam Darnold pick. They used the 38 to trade up to 36 to get But here's the thing, even if that didn't work out, that allowed them to take the 35 and trade up for Jermaine Johnson, because if they didn't have the 38, they have to take Breece Hall at 35 or go without a running back, which they did not want to do. Jermaine Johnson was the luxury. Breece Hall was the need. So even if that 38 ended up being a wash, so collecting all these picks, even if that 2nd rounder from Dallas this year ends up being a bust, but it allows the Jets to get cute with their 2nd and allows them, or with their 3rd or whatever, to get a guy that they otherwise wouldn't have got. Like, we always look back and say, who did those picks turn into? But especially in football, where we trade up and down so often, you can't look at it that way. You have to look at what level of flexibility did it create? What level of creativity did it free up? Did it lead to other moves? And so obviously this will, even when you look back, obviously it'll be an incomplete grade no matter what, because it's just one domino in a grand scheme of things. But that 2022 draft is proof that even if the Jets miss on a pick, which in that case they didn't, they both turned out to be excellent players, they're a generally conservative franchise. And so the more swings they can take, the more, that's how you get the Jets to get a good pick. Because if you just give the Jets 7 picks every year, they're just going to stay pat and draft in order. They need a little firepower to create flexibility. So particularly for this franchise, it's a no-brainer to just collect extra picks wherever you can.
Yeah, well, I will say that I did know about the their unwillingness to, because the Ravens did offer would only go up to a 2nd-round pick for Quinnen Williams, which I also don't disagree with the Ravens not going for giving up a 1st, because the Ravens, obviously they don't know that they're going to make the playoffs this year, right? Like, and they were not going to give up next year's 1st, because that's not what the Jets would have wanted. I mean, I know that that's what they took from the Cowboys, but the Cowboys are still, I don't know. I don't know actually why maybe the Ravens, I don't know. Maybe the Ravens just weren't confident in giving up a 1st. They like drafting in the 1st, right? They're very good at drafting 1st-round picks for the most part. They haven't had too many misses in the 1st. There's obviously exceptions.
Well, for the Cowboys, and I'm going to go a little sideways here, for the Cowboys, their problem is A, they don't use free agency, and B, they don't draft
money.
Of course, and they don't draft well on defense. Offensively, they're studs. They can't draft on defense. And so if you were going to find the face of this defense at some point, if you were going to give a Cowboy fan any reason to believe,
man, wasn't there someone?
Yeah, I mean, look at it in a vacuum, right? It's it basically turns into Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams for Micah Parsons. So hey, that's something. But yeah, it gives Dallas, sort of somebody to finally have as a face of that. Diggs and Bland have had their ups and downs the last couple of years. Mozzie Smith has been obviously a disaster for Dallas, but listen, again, I don't blame the Jets here. Just like how, right, Alabama's supposed to have another first-round quarterback this year. What do we know from the last 15 years of Alabama quarterbacks? Here we go, right? As soon as you get drafted as a defensive interior player to Dallas, okay, that might not be your fault, buddy. Like, welcome, good luck. We'll see you as a free agent in 4 to 5 years.
Was he one of the guys from Georgia?
No, he's one of the guys from Michigan. If you're on Georgia, you automatically get drafted to the Eagles.
That's fair. I mean, good on them, right? That worked out in their favor.
Yeah, no, they know what they're doing. And listen, we'll do a draft show as we get closer, but I'll tell you one of the things, and I know we're getting off track here and I know we're running out of time, but one of the things is when Georgia was going 34-2 over a 3-year span or whatever nonsense they did, and the Eagles were just picking the captain of the defense every year, you felt really good about those picks. They felt really obvious. We're entering a world in college football where these teams all look exploited week to week because honestly, 10-2 is getting you in the playoffs if you're a big school. Like, it doesn't matter anymore. So you can look, even, Mendoza had that incredible pass this week, but if he had lost to Penn State, he'd still be in the top 5. It wouldn't have fazed anybody. And so, I don't mind the Jets winning a few games because honestly, I'd almost rather, FanSided had 4 quarterbacks going in their top 6 in their mock draft that just came out about an hour and a half ago. If I'm going to take a quarterback, if I'm the Jets, and I'm not saying I would, I'd want to pick 6th. I'd want the 4th of these guys, to be honest. Trying to decide, I think Mendoza, I think he's cool as ice. I think he's going to get the hype. He's going to rise to be the first. But I think that's because it's a slightly down year. After that, Simpson from Alabama, Sellers from South Carolina, Moore from Oregon, man, unless one of them fits your system perfectly, I don't want to make that choice. It's like when Houston was happy to not have to pick between Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud a couple years ago, and it worked out for them, right? They got the better of the two after drafting second. So honestly, if I'm the Jets at this point, I still have the Saints on my schedule. I still have the Dolphins on my schedule. The Falcons are shockingly vulnerable on any given week. Even getting swept by the Patriots is never a foregone conclusion in the AFC East. You might win a couple games here by accident. And so if they end up picking 7th or 8th, knowing you have 5 or 6 picks in the first 2 rounds over the next couple of years or whatever you have, I'm actually not mad about it at this point. And, again, the unfortunately, again, hopefully these scouts are earning their salary because to me, it's getting much harder to look at college football and go, that's clearly the alpha. That's clearly the guy who's going to transfer to the NFL.
All right, I have two parts here. One is, what is your thoughts on that in the end? That why is there such an issue with college players, or do you want to save that for another thing?
We can save it for the longer answer for another time. But I do think that has a lot to do with the transfer portal, the nil deals, and the playoff. Right, the days of it's. I mean, we saw this with college basketball when the one and done first became a thing, right? I mean, we're talking 30 years ago, but it's no longer you commit to a school that is your home for 4 years. You have the occasional transfer, but you make sure you're with the right coach. You make sure you're in the right system. You make sure you're in the right spot to exemplify your talents, right? Now, some of these guys, I mean, LSU benched their guy who was supposed to be a top 5 pick this year yesterday, which should tell you how crazy things are getting in Nussmeier, right? How crazy things are getting in college football. They brought in a backup, Van Buren, who was Mississippi State's true freshman quarterback last year. I didn't even know he transferred. He came in and I said, wait, this sounds familiar. I mean, guys are literally transferring within conferences year to year, in a way that Van Buren looked better on Mississippi State. So now as a coach, as a scout, is that because there was less expectation there? Is that because, small pond, big pond? Is that because LSU has been one of the worst coach teams over the last 10 years? Because LSU focuses on a defense more? What's the takeaway? If you're only staying there 1 year, it's really hard And then of course we know from doing this show, legacy takes decades, narrative takes seconds, right? So the media will force, messages about these players long before we can actually get concrete evidence about who they actually are as players, as talents, as leaders, as teammates, as whatever. And so that's going to make it really, really hard, for many years. Now, again, the NBA has seemingly slowly figured it out. You're getting less and less top 5 busts than you would have, say, 20, 25 years ago. But there's still misses all over the place. You still get, this year it's Coward coming out of East Washington, right? He looks like a stud. How would you know a guy who, didn't even get offers coming out of high school, who was actually watching him when he was 17, 18? Nobody knew what he was capable of. So there's still those exceptions. But, the league will slowly catch up to itself, as does any sport, anytime, there seems to be changes happening.
And my last thing, and this is how we're going to end it. What is your thoughts on the Jets are potentially accumulating these picks to trade for Joe Burrow?
My favorite conversation.
Story.
No, this is a real story. This is not Kilroy trying to troll me. I will answer that, but just real quick before we do, because if you are watching the show going, wait, this turned into the Jet Hour. Just very quick, I love the Myers and the Shaheed trade for Jacksonville and Seattle, respectively. For Seattle, they get an incomplete grade because since Horton wasn't there today, he was injured. Kupp became the deep guy. Shaheed actually ran the ball a couple times, which Horton doesn't do. So we don't know how those 4 receivers in Seattle are going to fit together. So they get an I grade for now. But listen, Darnold looks great all of a sudden. He looks good all the time, but now he's been in a new level the last couple of weeks. You give him a new toy, why not? Bravo to Seattle for going for it in a wide open NFC West. Listen, I like Jacoby Myers, but listen, you blow a 19-point lead in the 4th. Jacoby Myers is not helping you solve that problem, buddy. They got issues in Jacksonville. They've always had issues in Jacksonville. There's no harm in adding him. I also shout out to Liam Cohen down in Jacksonville, though. I get that it's Myers' first game, so you weren't going to isolate him a ton anyway, but they made sure to make Parker Washington the number 1 targeted wide receiver today, and that's very well done by them because you want to send the message clearly. Myers is coming in to shore up a very injured offense. He's not coming in to replace anybody. That's still a young team. We know Jacksonville has never been a particularly mentally strong franchise or team. So bringing him in and having him contribute today but not take over, I do think was very smart, even though they lost in pretty grand fashion. It's a smart move by Cohen to do that. Now, with that being said, though, to answer your question directly, listen, there's 5 guys in the league who, if I woke up tomorrow and they were somehow on my team at quarterback, I'd be thrilled, right? And it's probably for the Jets, it's probably 20, but and Dak is number 6. He's pushing it, but it's your 5 AFC contenders every year, right? If Herbert, Burrow, Jackson, Allen, or Mahomes was somehow the Jet quarterback tomorrow, I would donate everything. I wouldn't need anything else. I'd be thrilled. So of course I'm not going to sit there and say no. With that being said, though, part of the reason I'm out on Mendoza, and part of at least at the moment, and part of the reason I'm out on the Jets drafting a quarterback in this draft in general, we saw from them bringing in Fields in the first place. Aaron Glenn wants to old school this thing up to no end. He wants to win on defense and is very okay having a game manager. I'm sure Aaron Glenn looked at that Mendoza throw yesterday to Cooper and said it was a nice throw, but in the back of his mind, he's probably thinking, I don't ever want my quarterback to be in a position where he has to make that throw, right? I genuinely think Aaron Glenn doesn't want the guy who's going to bail you out. He wants the guy who's going to put you in a position to not make the big mistake. And so I don't know.
So he doesn't want the Brett Favre?
No, he definitely doesn't. And so based on what they did at this deadline, you talked about it, and I think you're absolutely right, Kilroy. I do think the writing on the wall here is Aaron Glenn has just gotten an unofficial grand extension from what they did at this deadline, bringing in guys, and not even the deadline, throughout the year, bringing in guys like Brownlee, bringing in guys like Mozzie Smith. I mean, it is clear they want Aaron Glenn to develop these guys. And so they're not worried about flipping a switch and making the offense great. They're worried about the offense putting up 14 to 17 points naturally a game, trying to get a couple turnovers on defense, try and make that big special teams. Listen, I said back in the summer, Chris Banjo to me was one of the most underrated signings at any coaching position in the offseason, and he's proving it time and time again. They have something very, very special brewing on special teams, no pun intended. So I would say they're on the right track. Keep building defensively. Keep the, Isaiah Williams, like I said, wasn't even on the team on October. I think they cut him on October 4th and brought him back on October 19th or something. Obviously, after today, give him some leash. Wanku, looked good on his kick return today. So, I definitely think I couldn't be mad if that ends up being true, but it just doesn't seem like the Aaron Glenn thing to do, to go out and fix the quarterback, because I don't think he thinks the quarterback is broken. I think he just thinks he needs a game manager, not a star, which we've seen more often than not is not true, but it does work with some elite defenses. And I think Aaron Glenn plans on making this an elite defense. Will he get there? We have no idea, but he's certainly going to have a bunch of picks over the next 2 years to try and build one.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how it works in the end. I do think that they are probably not. I mean, I don't know. I'm not thrilled about this draft either. I don't believe Arch is going to be going out into this draft. I think he's going to stay another year, especially with the ups and downs he's had this year. Which again, this was his first year as a full-time starter, right? And everyone's like, oh, well, he couldn't beat out Quentin Ewers last year, so maybe that should have been a sign. It's like Quentin Ewers was not going to lose that job just because of his injury. He was going to keep it. Like, that's just how, it is. And we don't know how bad Quentin Ewers is. He had an injury last year. He was drafted, third, fourth round or whatever by the Dolphins. And the Dolphins may or may not give him a chance this year because they're not sure about the long-term with Tua Tagovailoa. When will we find this stuff out? Who knows? It's a weird. It's been a weird few years with quarterbacks, with players in general, and eventually we will have that like we did with the NBA, where teams start figuring out how to properly evaluate players and talent and things like that, because there is that I do agree with you that constant shifting between teams does make it tough for players to learn things. And then you come into the NFL, you're not going to be as prepared. So it's a little bit tougher to figure it out. Not everyone is Joe Burrow, but Joe Burrow was an older rookie as well, right? People forget that. Right. I think he was like 23 or something like that when he came into the NFL. So, and we'll see as time will tell. If I'm the Jets, if a quarterback falls into our laps that we're comfortable with, yeah, I'll take him. But I wouldn't be doing anything where I'm packaging these picks, moving up to get a quarterback. If a quarterback falls in my lap that I like, take him. If not, use this to fix your offensive line, fix your defensive line, go find your corners, your safeties, your linebackers, whatever position you feel needs the most to be addressed outside of quarterback. Don't reach for quarterbacks. Let one fall into your lap. And at this point, that's how I feel for every team, right? Don't reach for quarterback. Let one fall into your lap. Build out the rest of your roster. You'll find and eventually you can find a quarterback. And especially if it's with these rookie contracts now, you don't have to worry about a quarterback. They're not like you had with Sam Bradford, right? Where you're saddled with this ridiculous contract. If your quarterback doesn't work out, move on for them pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we'll go further down the line, especially once we know where everyone settles in the draft order. But again, the teams that you could make a case for need a quarterback. Cleveland is right now ahead of the Jets, ahead of in terms of closer to one. New Orleans is ahead of the Jets. Arizona only has one more win than the Jets and does not honestly has one of the hardest schedules amongst the bottom seven. They're one of the few who doesn't play each other. The Titans have the one. You got to imagine they wouldn't give up on Cam Ward yet, but he has not looked. I mean, we saw it with Josh Rosen, right? So, I mean, it's not like we haven't seen it before. Right. Callahan was fired, so it is a new coach next year, but presumably they won't. But the point is, it's not like if the Jets are drafting 7th versus drafting 11th, one of those teams in between. Like, if you could imagine a world where the Raiders draft their protege to Geno Smith if they end up in front of the Jets. But that doesn't seem like a Pete Carroll thing to do. Pete Carroll doesn't want to waste a first-round pick in the limited time he has left. And then so many other teams who are kind of like Washington now might end up closer to 1 than the Jets due to Daniel's injury. They're not drafting a quarterback, right? The Falcons somehow are at 3 wins, even though they look – I feel like the Falcons have 6 or 7 wins. They're at 3 somehow. They're always in competitive games they manage to lose.
I mean,
they're not going to move on from Penix, right? So those teams that are going to end up with
they should possibly. I'm not sure. But that's another story. I'm not sold on Penix, but I'm not.
But that's for another day. But the thing is, I don't think there's much danger in the Jets to get back to the trade deadline of did this help them? Did this hurt them?
No, it definitely helped them.
The fact that they won today is shocking to me. I mean, they won on special teams. Good for them. Do I think they're going to win a lot the rest of the way? No. But if you're sitting there as a Jet fan today saying, oh, we wanted to go 1-16, I don't think 1 versus 4 wins is as critical as you think it is, because I don't think listen, Miami and they're the big defensive guy is the edge rusher from Miami. Miami has looked very beatable in their couple losses in the ACC. There are a couple offensive tackles in the top 10, which are really the only thing that we don't need. And honestly, if I had any pick in this draft, I love Tate, the wide receiver from Ohio State.
Throwing up that's never a bad thing.
You're probably not taking him first, right? So in a way, you almost want to drop to like 4th or 5th, where you wouldn't be universally panned for drafting a wide receiver, right? So there's merit to falling behind New Orleans, falling behind Cleveland, falling behind a couple of these teams. Let the Titans draft first and take an offensive tackle. Let Cleveland and New Orleans take quarterbacks at 2 and 3. And then at 4, you're basically taking whoever you wanted anyway, because those positions were, to me, quarterback's taboo in this draft, and you don't need an offensive tackle. You have the 2 from the last 2 years. So, I'm not worried about a win or 2 is just kind of the concluding statement I'll give here.
I will say this to end it with the Ravens. I liked the trades that they did. What I would like to see the Ravens do moving forward, even if they make the playoffs, which they easily could, because they have a very nice week end of the season schedule. They do have to play Pittsburgh twice, which is always a little bit scary, but I think that they need to really evaluate their defensive coordinator position. That this is 2 years in a row you've had very slow starts with their defense with the same defensive coordinator, and it bit them last year, and it's definitely biting them this year. That they easily could have been in contention for the AFC. I mean, excluding the injuries to Lamar, but that's another story. That's different. They lost Buffalo because the Ravens defense was bad, and Buffalo looks like a very beatable team. I don't know if Buffalo is as good as their record indicates that they are. Not to say that they're obviously their offense is good. It's not, that's never been an issue or isn't the issue, but Buffalo was a very winnable game. Kansas City was a winnable game. The Ravens had a lot of winnable games, and their defense just doesn't seem to be able to play in the fourth quarter. And either that's John Harbaugh or that's Zach Orr. Figure it out.
I'm with you on that, buddy.
So thank you all for listening. Remember, like, share, subscribe, comment down below what your thoughts are on the trade deadline. Good night.
Good night.